The cash flow for this bond will be 2 years, and every 6 months it will drop a payment. And the payment amount will be how much? 10,000 times what percent? 10%, but that's annually. How much is it semi-annually? 500. So 500 at 6 months, 500 at the year, 500 at 6 months, 500 at the year. This will be July 1st. This will be January 1st. This will be July 1st. This will be January 1st of the last year. Can you shut off the lights, please? Thank you. And then on the last payment, it will also pay out $10,000. So this is the cash flow that this bond will always pay, and it is determined by the indenture, and it never changes. Amortization schedule for this bond would be a little boring, but since it's easy, we're going to create one anyway. An amortization schedule is a way where you calculate how much interest you're going to charge. Amortization schedule. And there'll be a row for each period, the starting value, and then there'll be the first payment and the second payment and the third payment, and then finally the last payment on 1/1. So we have a period. The next row is what is going to be the cash interest paid. The paid cash interest. The third column is going to be the interest expense. The fourth column would have a current amortization of any premium or discount. Do we have one on this bond? No, because we're selling it at par. And then there's an unamortized balance on the bond, and it could be a premium or discount. I'm setting up the table so we can use it for anything. And then the bond will have a carrying value. I would like for you to just watch. I wouldn't worry too much about notes because you can print these in the end. So what is our cash interest going to be paid each time? So it's going to pay out cash interest on each payment of $500. And I'm going to put an interest rate right here to remind you that this is from the bond indenture, and it's half of that because it pays out semi-annually. That's 5%. The market interest was what? 5% as well in this example. So our interest expense is going to be calculated on the carrying value of the bond, and the way you calculate the carrying value of the bond is to take the $10,000 bond payment and times it by the par value of the bond, and since this was sold at par value, at the percent, will be 100. 10,000 times 100 is 10,000, so the carrying value of this bond, little boring example, $10,000. What is $10,000 times 5%? 500. So the first payment is 500. The interest expense will be 500. There is no premium. There is no discount. The carrying value is the same. The second payment will be the market value, 5%, times the carrying value of the bond, still 500. No premium, no discount. Carrying value the same. The third payment will be on the market value of the bond times 5%. 5% of 10,000, 500. Not amortizing any premium or discount. The carrying value remains the same, and the same for the last payment, because this bond was sold at a market rate of interest that was equal to the stated rate of interest. So, how much total cash interest is going to be paid? $2,000. How much actual interest should be expensed over the life of the bond? That would be the total of the market value by 2,000. So the stated rate and the market rate are all going to switch the automatic focus off so it will quit moving around on you. Let's make the journal entries for this bond, and we'll be done with the par value bond. Journal entries. On the first day, you get $10,000. So you borrow $10,000, so you'll get cash of $10,000. You have no premium or discount, so we'll just set up the bond payable at the full amount, $10,000, and that records the issue of the bond on day 1 of the first year. Then you move out 6 months, and what happens? On 7/1, the first interest payment is paid. How much will it be? $500. So we'll say, actually the bond, was issued on 1/1. Forgive me for that. Issued right here. You borrow $10,000. You move out 6 months, and on 7/1, you make the first cash payment, and it will be interest expense in the amount of $500 and cash in the amount of $500. Sound good? Move out in time to the second interest payment. This business has a calendar year end, so on December 31st, they've accrued all the interest for this period, but they haven't paid it yet because it's not due to be paid until when? Tomorrow. So, we'll accrue interest on 31st, but we won't pay it, but it does need to get matched into the correct period. So for the second payment, we'll say interest payable, $500. And that takes us through December 31st, our calendar year end. What happens tomorrow? They pay it. So it's 1/1. I'm infatuated with 7s today. It's 1/1, and they'll pay this payment. So we're going to credit cash of $500, fair enough, but what is the debit this time? Interest payable. I'm not going to continue on because the next payment would be 7/1, and it would repeat. And then the next payment would be 12/31, and this would repeat. And then we would be to the end of the life of the bond, and this would repeat. But what also happens right here? What happens right here? You pay back the bond in full. It matures. And so, on this last payment, when you are on 1/1 at the very end of our timeline, you're going to have bonds payable going away in the amount of $10,000 and cash going away. Could you combine the last interest payment with this and record them both at once? Yes. Interest payable could be debited, and the cash could be $10,500 if you only wanted to issue one check. That takes care of looking at a bond that is issued at par value. And I'm wondering if now you have any questions on that or any of the journal entries that we did. What do you think? Good? Straightforward and simple. I wanted to bother to do the par value one because it kind of loses its simplicity, but then again, not really, when you move to a premium or a discount. So, for our next example, let's move to issuing the bond at a premium or discount. What do you want to do? You get to pick, Ashton.
Premium.
We're going to do a premium first. So our next example is going to be a bond premium. And it's going to be the same bond, a $10,000 bond with a stated rate of interest at 10%. It pays interest semi-annually, and it pays interest on July 1st and December 31st. And the cash flow from this bond is determined by the indenture. Ah, yes, thank you. January 1st. Who was that, Dorothy? Thank you. So there's our indenture, and it kicks us out. We pay interest twice a year. Your author's infatuated with making you incur interest for one day. I don't know why he does that, but we will. First payment will be on 7/1, second payment on 1/1, then the next year 7/1, and then again on 1/1. The first interest payment will be $500, the second will be $500, the third will be $500, the fourth will be $500. The bond will mature and they'll pay out its cash value. And that never changes because that is contracted in the indenture. What changed is the rate that the market is paying for interest. The market is currently paying 8%. If the market is paying 8%, we want to sell the bond at an amount that it will yield 8% and cost us 8%. So we will sell it at a premium. And the amount of the premium will be just enough to change the return of the bond from 10%, its stated rate, to 8%, the market rate. If you were to calculate the price of the bond, you would find out that the premium amount comes in at what is stated as 103.62. So we're going to say the bond sells for 103.62, and that's how it'd be listed in the paper. And what that tells you is times the face value of the bond by that amount, and that will tell you what the bond sells for. How much will you get for this bond then? Ashton? $10,362. $10,000 is the face value of the bond. $362 is the premium. It is exactly the difference between 8% and 10%. Let's make an amortization schedule that will amortize that premium away. So we need the same columns. We're going to have a period. We're going to have the cash interest paid. We're going to have the market rate of interest, which equals interest expense. And then we're going to need to take a little bit out of the premium account to help change the yield. We'll have a balance in the premium account that we're amortizing off. And then we'll have a carrying value of the bond on our amortization schedule. And again, this is called an amortization schedule. And we are currently amortizing a premium. We'll have 4 periods. We'll have our beginning balances. Our beginning balance starts at $10,362, and the balance to start with in our premium is $362. The carrying value of the bond includes the premium. Are you guys ready? What's the first cash interest payment going to be? $500. And what percent of interest is that at? What it's always at, 5%. What is the market rate of interest? It's sold at 8, so what is the semi-annual amount? 4%. So I want you to take 10,362, Ashton, and times it by 4% and tell me what that number is.
414.48.
414.48. I'm going to round to 414. No dollars. It'll make us all crazy. So if the cash payment is $500 and the real interest expense at 4% is $414, what is the difference?
$86.
$86 is going to get amortized out of that premium account. What is 362 minus 86?
276.
276. So my carrying value of the bond will be $10,276 at this point in time. I would like to complete the entire amortization schedule with you and then go back and make journal entries so you can see how it's computed and do it row after row. When we get to 111, there'll be another interest payment made, and it will be $500 at 5%. That never changes. What is 4% of 10,276?
411.
411. How much is the difference between 500 and 411?
89.
So I'm going to amortize $89 of that premium out on this payment. 276 minus 89 is what?
187.
That is how much of my premium is left to amortize. And the carrying value of my bond is $10,187. Go out another payment. It will be $500. What is 4% times 10,187?
407.
407. What is the amount of the premium I will use this time?
93.
93. How much is left in the premium? 187 minus 93.
94.
$94, and the carrying value of the bond is $10,094. Does anyone want to take a guess on how much we're going to amortize next time? I'll bet it's 94. If not, we're going to make it because we'll have a small rounding error. What is 4%, the market rate of interest, times our carrying value?
403.76.
We'll go with 403 because we need 404. 404 is, we need 406. We need 406, so we have a little rounding error. That's all right. We're plugging the last interest expense to make it work. What's the difference between 500 and 406? 94 will come out of our premium, which will use it up, and the carrying value on the day that it matures will be the face value of the bond. If you total the interest, cash interest paid, it will be $2,000. If you total the current premium, it will equal $362. We use the premium to offset interest expense to change it from 5% down to 4% because we sold the bond to yield that exact amount. How much is the total of the interest expense on this bond? And it will be $2,000 minus $362, so $1,638. How's my math? Good? What do you get, Ashton?
1638.
And if you add up this column, it would equal that. So the difference between 10% and 8% exactly is $362, or 8% is $1,638, and 10% is $2,000. Would you like to see some journal entries? So you have made the amortization schedule, and all journal entries will be taken off of these amounts. So let's record the issuance of the bond first. The bond is issued at 103.62, so that tells us we'll get cash of $10,362. We calculated that up here. And we'll have a bonds payable in an amount of $10,000. It is always done on the face value of the bond. And we will set up a premium account in the amount of $362. And all of this happens on the very first day that that bond is issued, 1/1 of the first year. Everybody good? Let's go out to the first interest payment, and your numbers that you need for your journal entry are on the first row. How much cash are we going to pay? Cash is always $500. That is never going to change. It's contracted. How much is interest expense? $414. And the difference is going to come out of the premium account. And it is going to be $86. It's not a very good 8. There you go. So the 4% is 414, and 5% is 500, and the difference is in the premium account, and that records our first payment. Let's move out to December 31st and accrue interest at the end of the year. We're using our second row. What is interest expense for the second payment? $411. How much is coming out of the premium account for the second payment? $89. And interest payable is how much? $500. And that is on December 31st. And what happens the very next day? You pay the interest payment. How much is the interest payment? $500? So we'll pay cash of $500. And what is the debit for that? Interest payable. It is not interest expense because we incurred it for one day, because your author is infatuated with that. So now we come to a point where I ask you, would you like to finish making all the journal entries, or would you like to move on? Would you like to do another row? Yes, I hear. All right. Let's make the interest payment for 7/1, because we're now to here. And we'll use row 3, which would be for 7/1, our third payment. What is interest expense? 407. What is the amount of the premium that we are going to amortize? 93. How much is the cash payment? How much is the cash payment always? 500. So we have just made the third payment. We go to the year end now, assuming it's a calendar year end, and we grab the fourth payment and accrue the interest. How much interest expense on our fourth payment? 406. How much comes out of the premium? 94. How much is going to be paid? Nothing. Trick question. What do we put it in? Interest payable. Good job, Pedro. 500. Your name just went out online. And what happens on the next day? We're now here. Well, we're going to make an interest payment, and we're going to pay off the bond. Do you want to make 2 journal entries or 1? You pick. 1 journal entry. So the next day, how much cash are we going to write the check for? $10,500, because we owe them 1 more interest payment, and we owe them the principal amount on the bond. So I need to get rid of bonds payable in the amount of $10,000, and I need to get rid of interest. And is it interest payable or interest expense? Interest payable, 500. It is not interest expense. And I didn't need the third line, and that is the entry to record paying the last payment in one entry. And that is how you do the accounting for a bond premium. The diagram for cash flows did not change. That is determined by the indenture. The amortization schedule for a premium takes and amortizes the premium out over the life of the bond on the interest method. And then these are the journal entries that we use to record the entire life of that very short-lived bond. Questions on premiums? All right, you good? Dorothy? What benefits do you get if you get the same amount of cash? The premium, it's not the same amount of cash, Dorothy, because you ended up getting $362 extra when you issued it, and you used that $362 to offset interest expense in the future. So the person that issued this bond took in $10,362 at the beginning and paid out $10,000 at the end. And the $362 was enough to change the interest rate from the stated rate of the bond to the market rate of 8%. Not kind of, but dead on the head. Exact, completely exact. Now, we amortized it on the interest method, which meant we applied the market rate of return to the bond's carrying value. It's tempting when it's this little to take 362, divide it by 4, and do it evenly over the life of the bond, and that is called the straight line method. But it isn't an allowed method when the dollar amounts are large, and on bonds they're always large. But there is the straight line method, and if you invest in a bond for a very short period of time, you might be doing that. So we used the appropriate accounting method called the effective interest method. And that is what Appendix B in your book's about. Would you like to do the bond discount? Let's do a bond discount, and I have to bore you a little bit. We're doing a bond, and we're doing the discount, and I want to show you how to amortize the interest and the journal entries. And again, what is our indenture telling us? We'll use the same example. The indenture says a $10,000 bond. The bond is a 10% bond. It pays interest semi-annually, and it pays interest on July 1st and January 1st. Got it right that time, aha. And here is the indenture, the contract on which the bond was issued under. The diagram of the cash flow is making you crazy. I know, but we have to look at it because I want you to understand. It never changes. How much do you get paid on 7/1? How about on 1/1? And on 7/1? And on 1/1, 500 plus the value of the bond. So Dorothy, notice at the end I'm paying $10,000 out. So that is the contracted terms of the bond, and that will never change. What does change is the interest rate in the economy. And the interest is going to be 12% in our example, so the market rate of interest is 12%. We need to sell the bond to yield 12%. Would you buy a bond that's paying 10% if you could invest at 12? And the answer is no. So we must sell our bond at a discount, something less. that will turn the investor's rate of return from 10% to 12%, and that unfortunately will turn our interest rate from 10% to 12%. The author gives you a shortcut and says that bond would sell at 96.54. That's the way it would appear in the paper, and you know that you would take that and times it by 10,000, and that would tell you how much you can sell your bond for. And Dorothy, back to your question. You must pay 10,000 at the end, but you only get 9,654 at the beginning. And the difference between those two is the exact amount it takes to take the yield from 10% to 12%. Not kind of, but exactly. So we make an amortization schedule so you can see how you do it with a discount. Oh, say yes.
Yes.
I knew you would. An amortization schedule to amortize that discount away. And we'll have periods. I'm using the same schedule that your author uses and that your homework uses. The first column's the period. The second one, cash interest paid, and that is always going to be at what percent? 5. And then the second column is the market interest, and it's going to be interest expense. And what is it in this case? 6, because it's half of the market rate since we're doing it semi-annually. And then we'll have to take some out of the current discount to make up the difference between 5 and 6. And then there will be an unamortized balance on the discount that we'll want to keep track of. And then there will be a carrying value of this bond, and it will start at 9,654. What is the amount of the discount, Ashton? $346. And how many periods? 4. And how much is cash interest on each payment? 500. And how much cash paid is there? Oops, too many zeros. How much cash is going to be paid? 2,000. And then how much is going to be expensed? The difference. I know how much is in the discount. The discount is 346. So I know the difference between 10% and 12% is going to make it be totaling 2,346. An interesting look at it. This is 10%. This is 12%. And this is the discount. And we will amortize the discount over each period. And it'd be tempting to divide it by 4 and do it straight line, but that's not allowed. We're going to use the effective rate of interest, which means we're going to take 6% and times it by the carrying value to determine interest expense. What is 9654 times 6%, Ashton?
579.
579. So I need to use $79 of that discount in this period. If there's 346 available and 79 is left, what will the balance in the discount be after?
267.
267. And what will the carrying value of my bond be? 10,000 minus 267 is what?
9733.
Let's finish our amortization schedule so you get some practice at this. What is, I got my comma in the wrong place. You guys will laugh when you hear me screwing up on this recording. What's 9733 times 6%?
584.
584. So I'm going to take $84, the difference between 500 and 584, out of the discount and use it this period to change it from 10% to 12%. 267 minus 84 is what?
183.
That is how much of my discount is left to amortize. The carrying value of the bond is 10,000 minus the 183. How much is that?
9817.
Notice the carrying value of the bond is getting closer and closer to what? 10,000, because that's where it needs to end at. We have to amortize it off over that period. What is 6% of 9,817?
589.
589. So $89 is getting amortized out of the discount this period. 183 minus 89 is how much?
94.
So $94 left to go. 10,000 minus $94 is what? 9,906. Right?
Yep.
What is 9,906 times 6%?
594.
Bingo, hit it that time. How much comes out of the discount? 94. Discount goes to 0. Carrying value of bond is hit. On the day the bond is due, we amortize the difference out on the effective interest method by picking up the difference between the stated rate of interest and the market rate of interest and applying that to the carrying value each period. Would you like to see the journal entries?
Yes.
Journal entries. We'll do all of them, and then we want to talk about the balance sheet. So, what happens on the day you issue this bond? Go back to the very first day. How much money are we going to get? $9,654 cash. $9,654. And I'm going to set up a bond discount account. Discount on bonds payable. And it is in the amount of $346. And in bonds payable, as always, goes the face amount of the bond. And this is the difference between a 10% yield and a 12% yield. What happens on 7/1, our first payment? How much cash am I going to pay? How much cash right here? Always 500. What is, so there's my cash, what is my interest expense?
579.
And there you can see the difference in the interest rate. $79. Where am I going to get the $79? I'm going to amortize it out of the discount on bonds payable account. And the discount account will then have $267 in it. So it's going away. What happens on 12/31 when I hit my year end? How much is interest expense on this payment? $584. How much is the cash? Ashton already told me. Always 500. Out of the discount comes 84, but I just made a mistake, didn't I?
Yes.
Because we're not paying it. What is it? Interest payable. When are we going to pay it? Tomorrow. On 1/1, because that's how the author wanted to do it. So we'll debit interest payable for 500 and credit what? Cash. So we are the issuer in this example, and our bond is costing us 12% because we did not get $10,000 for it. We got $9,654 for it. Let's move to the third year. What is the entries that will be made on 7/1 of the third year? Cash is always 500, so I'll write that down. How much is amortized out of the discount on bonds payable? 89. How much is interest expense on this third payment? 589. So as you can see, I'm just using my numbers. Then we get to 12/31. Where are we? We are one day shorter, right here. What do we need to do on 12/31? We need to recognize interest expense. for the last period right here. How much is it? $594. How much comes out of the bond discount? And how much is in interest payable? $500. What happens the very next day? Everything comes due. Do you want one entry or two this time? One entry. How much cash am I going to pay? $10,500. How much interest payable goes away? $500. How much goes out of bonds payable? $10,000. So that wipes out our bond. And the reason we were able to change the effective rate of interest from the stated rate of interest is we sold it for less. So bond prices change with interest rates in the market. If the interest rates in the market go up, then the price of bonds go down. And if the price of interest goes down, the market price of bonds goes up. Inversely related. Kind of a nice investment tip. When the market's dropping, interest rates, as a general rule, on investments are going up. A good way to diversify if you are an investor. So, oh my heck, still recording. Y'all know you're being recorded, yeah?
Yes.
How does all of this look on the balance sheet? You guys are going to be glad this is recorded and you can watch it as many times as you want, go forward and backward and stop it and delete it, right? You won't be able to delete the harm from your memory. You can review it again on your own. Let's play with the balance sheet and how a bond looks on the balance sheet. And in our first example, when the bond was issued at par, the bonds payable looked like $10,000 the whole time, because there was no premium and there was no discount. It sat at $10,000 until it was paid off, and then it went to zero. You agree? So the par was pretty easy. Let's look at the next one we did, our bond at a premium. We have an account called bonds payable on the balance sheet, and this is always a liability, and generally it's not a current liability. Generally it's long term, but this is a short bond. Usually they're 30 years in length. And when we first calculated our premium on the bond, when we sold it at 8%, we said the bond premium was $362, and that would show on the bond, on the face of the balance sheet, and it would say bonds payable premium, and then it would say $10,362. It would not say carrying value, but that's what that number is called. It's kind of like book value. You never see that written on a balance sheet, but that's what the asset minus accumulated depreciation is called. So we'll write it there. That's what it would look like at the end, or at the beginning of its life on 1/1. I'm going to go to the end of the first year, 12/31, on the bond we just amortized from the premium, and look at my amortization schedule. And at the second payment, it said the bond was at $10,187. So at 12/31, the bond payable would be at $10,000, and the premium would have been written down twice for the two payments, and it would now have $187 left in it, and it would be at $10,187 at year end. At the end of the next year, the bond payable, which was only a 2-year bond, would be at $10,000, and the premium was fully amortized off, and the bond was at carrying value, and it paid out the next day. How did that bond premium account look? Well, it's an adjunct account, meaning it adds to an account, in this case bonds payable. It started at $362. First we amortized out $86, then we amortized out $89, and that's when we got to this number. Then we amortized out $93, and then we amortized out $94, and it was at 0, and that's when we got to this number. That's how a premium looks. How about a discount? Bonds payable is always shown at face value, so it's always 10. And when we started with our discount, it is an adjunct account. It subtracts from the account it relates to, and we had $346 in it, and the carrying value of the bond was $9,654, the amount we sold it for. And you would call that a carrying value. So a premium is an adjunct account and it adds on, and a discount is a contra account and it subtracts off. At the end of the first year, we were at still bonds payable at $10,000, and after the second payment, the discount had been amortized down to $183, and the carrying value, I'm just going to write it like that, carrying value of this bond at that time was $98.17. And at the end of the fourth payment, the bond payable was at $10,000. The discount had been fully amortized, and the carrying value and the face value on the date of maturity are the same. How did the discount account look throughout its life? It started with $346, like we noted right there. The first payment we amortized $79. The second payment, $84. The third payment, $89. That's what our balance was right here. And the fourth payment picked up the last of it, and it was gone. So the fate of a premium or discount is to get amortized against the related interest expense account under the effective interest method over the life of the bond. Have a great rest of the day.